manifestations of aspects of infectious disease that may go back 500,000 years in this latter case, tuberculosis, and maybe even more. So it's something that is gigantic in the sense of how it continues to affect us as human beings. Some of that came along with being evolutionary-wise, as I say, as evolutionary hitchhikers from different aspects. We share some things in common closer with our cousins, the chimps and the orangutans and the great apes, in other words. We'll wait a few more minutes now. But through time, as will become more evident as we get going in course and you get reading and everything else, it has altered the course of history many times and may well promise to continue to do that, unfortunately. But I have a historian friend who said up until, I think he said World War II, at least World War I, more people died from infectious disease primarily, than ever were killed on the battlefield. And it reminds me of something I read not long ago because it was tied into Haiti and the destruction there that happened with the earthquake. That Napoleon Bonaparte was easily talked out of giving up Haiti because of yellow fever. His troops were decimated. Yellow fever is mosquito vector transmitted, came from Africa from, it looked like monkeys, macaque, and I forget the other, possibly chimpanzees, transmitted Africans and then transmitted over to the New World by African slavery. And they were carriers of goods. So it goes on, those sort of things. And even during Vietnam War, a lot of troops, not only from napalm being dropped in Agent Orange, which cleared so many of the trees, but it brought out of the jungle and out of the forest all kinds of nasty things that took somewhat hold. So in all cases, we should think about, and I just put this up here for thinking, you don't have to memorize. And we'll talk about the course and all that sort of stuff in just a few moments, but increased population, what do these things have in common? Land clearance and drainage, rapid transportation worldwide, in people and goods, war, of which it seems like we never get enough dissatisfied with to stop it all around the world. Poverty, extreme poverty and hunger, related prostitution to those kinds of things, and climate change. Those are just some of the things that you can think about, how dynamically those interact to produce increased rates of different kinds of diseases. War and displaced peoples. Just turn the TV on anytime you want, or on the internet, you'll see all of those sort of things. We'll be talking somewhat more today specifically about some of these issues. But land clearance is becoming a major thing, and some of it's related to population. My goodness, we're over 6 billion people.
Actually, I thought the worldwide clock turned to 7 billion, I think, wasn't it in October, November?
Yeah,
it was in the,
it was.
in the news.
It was.
It was in the news.
6 still low.
Yeah, because it was on
Anyway,
or whatever.
I remember that.
Holy mackerel, that's a lot of people.
I remember that because I was at the PCC campus and my psychology teacher was making a big deal about it.
At the minute, huh?
Yeah, like she told us beforehand when they were predicting that it was going to happen.
So what that does, and people revolt against getting tired of being at the bottom of stuff, the social hierarchy, so you get part of the reason of rebellion, rightfully, in some kind of warfare and concentration of wealth in some of these places, including our own in different levels, but it gets there. But we won't get into that in this course. But what happens is that we clear more and more land, and the Amazon is disappearing. I have some of my work has been in Central and South America, and I have family in Ecuador. And we're seeing the disappearance there of the tropical forest in the Amazon basin for gold, and with the price of gold now, are you kidding? You can't hold that back, and shooting and then bulldozing it. What that does is, of course, it changes the vector. We'll talk just a little bit about some of these terms for those of you that may not be familiar with them. I try to keep down, and this is not a course in microbiology. There'll be a few things, and I'll make it very specific that some of these things you'll have to know. But my goodness, what that draws out for possible variation and changes in pathogen loads for people and transmitted by other animals in between. One of the scary things that has occurred in the last 10 years, and all of you certainly heard it because it is so scary, is Ebola. We mentioned a little bit of Lassa fever. A number of these hemorrhagic, we call it, because they rupture capillary walls and blood vessel walls and you just get blood. You die generally pulmonary edema just from everything bleeding. We think the best we have an idea on Ebola came out of Congo Basin and some of those areas by hunters that are going in desperate and they're getting chimpanzees and other places that nobody ever went before, and then subsequently settlements developing in those areas, more land clearance. And by butchering these animals and eating the meat, and in the market you'll see this veritable wet market of different kinds of animals brought in there and stationed together. It's a veritable brew of microorganisms ready to happen, to jump around and go to each other and then change into something else, because as we know, their mutation rate and generation rate are different than our generations of 20 years. 20 minutes on some of these characters.
And that's
So,
humans.
sorry? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So exactly some of those kinds of things that I put up here to think about what's in common of them are the increase and explosion of types of pathogens we have not been exposed to.
Plus, the other thing in the third world country, and since you've traveled to South America and you've seen it, is that the level of hygiene and food safety is almost non-existent. Because I've traveled to South America, some of these open air markets, and people go get their, getting an egg that's not been refrigerated for 2 hours, okay, I can deal with that, but having beef and chicken out there in the open for 2-3 hours.
Stress on resources. When you get more and more people, and you get, bad crops for a few years, and then over time, colonialism played a role in the socio-political picture back and continues in some ways. So, immense kinds of problem. So let's go home, forget this. Okay. This course is by and large anthropology. I was hoping, because Michael Ingles in history, that maybe he'd push it a little bit more if I slashed it or dashed it with history, which anthropology is related to. But by and large, it takes a strong anthropological bend. And you'll have to turn around now. And this is nothing to be memorized either, and a lot of things today will just be talked about to get us kicked off. And at the top, I just want to give you a little sense of where anthropology, if you don't know any sense for this, is. In this country, it's taught as, and graduate work level and undergraduate for majors, is a 4-field division. There are 2 major things about anthropology that kept me in it for, I won't say how many years, and kept me going back to graduate school because I got bored in one little area and I could go back and take a whole bunch of graduate courses in something else. And that it is more reliable in the sense that it is holistic in perspective. That means it combines biological stuff with social, cultural, and economic. It's not just narrowly focused on one thing. And it's global. And of course, some parts are more scientific, depending on how you want to define them. So they're, by and large, these kind of divisions that you see. And physical, biological anthropology, you can major if you're in early graduate school or even in in some undergraduate colleges. There's specialties within human variation. How come we differ in the world? What is it? Well, without going too much at length, in my physical anthropology, biological anthropology, we spend quite a bit of time about skin color. It has an awful lot to do with where your genes originated on the planet in terms of climate, solar radiation, those sorts of things, and vitamin D synthesis, all that sort of stuff. We find, just one thing I will say about this, we find rickets, which is one of the deforming yes, we'll have pictures of the old bone stuff. Deformation of bone, particularly hips and femurs with weight on them, when there is not enough vitamin D to insert the calcium and mineralize the bone. And so what happens is that